Hello again everyone, and today I'm looking at one of Chinese company YONGNUO's newest lenses, the YONGNUO 50mm f1.8 SDA DSM. It's a fully electronic lens for Sony's mirrorless E-mount cameras, and it's going to cost $120 when it comes out, or around £100 here in the UK, so that's a very low price for an autofocus lens with an aperture as bright as f1.8. I'd like to thank YONGNUO for sending me a sample lens for testing, although as usual this is a totally independent review. We'll be looking at both its strengths and its weaknesses. It is for cameras with smaller APS-C sensors, so if you attach it to a full-frame Sony camera, then this will be the vignetting you'll see. So, on an APS-C camera, the lens's equivalent focal length is 75mm, so that's perfect for shooting portraits or other subject photography. And with an aperture as bright as f1.8, you can get snappy shutter speeds and nicely out of focus backgrounds in your images. Let's look at the lens's build quality. The lens feels light and plasticky, which is exactly what you'd expect at such a very low price point. But it is at least based on a metal lens mount, and it has a USB connection too for future upgrades. The lens's only control point is a manual focus ring. It turns quite lightly and loosely. It's electronically coupled with the lens's focus motor, but actually works quite responsively in use. As you change focus, the lens zooms in as you focus more closely. The lens's autofocus motor works quite quickly, but it briefly hunts before finally locking onto your target. The autofocus worked accurately on my camera, but it makes a very quiet little whirring noise, which isn't really audible unless you hold your ear to the lens. When shooting in video mode, even on the fastest setting, the lens slows down a lot and is a bit unsure of itself. If you turn your recording volume all the way up, then you'll hear some quiet clicking as the focus motor works away. The lens's aperture is controlled through the camera, and that worked fine, and EXIF information was properly recorded to the image file. I checked for that. I got a lot of my sample pictures on a camera with in-body image stabilization, my A7R II. I noticed that the stabilization didn't seem to work terribly well until I manually put the setting onto 50mm, and then it was a bit more steady, so that's a little tip for you. The lens did work properly with my camera's eye autofocus feature though, I'm glad to say. The lens comes with caps and a little hood, and its filter size is a small 49mm. Overall, while the lens does feel a bit low budget in your hands, its electronics work well enough and there are no serious problems with its build quality. So, let's move on and look at image quality. I'll be testing it on a Sony a5100 with its 24MP sensor, and in-camera corrections are turned on. At f1.8, we see very good sharpness and contrast in the middle of the image, but contrasting edges show quite a lot of purple fringing, as you can see here, but that really is only on strongly contrasting edges. The corner image quality is fairly soft. If you stop down to f2.8, then we see only a tiny bit more contrast in the corners of the image, but picture quality back in the middle has become spectacular. Stop down to f4 and it's even just a tiny bit better there, and now the corner image quality is sharpening up well. f5.6 and f8 see further tiny little improvements, with picture quality becoming excellent across the whole image frame. If you stop all the way down to f16 though, you'll see some softness emerging due to the physical effects of diffraction. Overall, considering this lens's low price, the performance isn't bad. It's always very sharp in the middle of your images, and the corners are pretty sharp from f4, so on a 24MP camera, the lens makes itself pretty useful. Now let's see about distortion and vignetting, with in-camera corrections now turned off. The lens projects some noticeable pincushion distortion, and the corners are a little dark at f1.8. They brighten up a fair bit by the time you've stopped down to f2.8, and a little more again at f4, so just an average performance here. Next, close-up image quality. This lens can focus down to 45 centimeters, that's about average for a 50mm lens. At f1.8, close-up image quality takes a small hit, but it's still quite usable. Stop down to f2.8 and everything comes up roses though, and at f4 the close-up image quality is perfect. Now let's see how well the lens works against bright lights. You will want to keep them out of your picture. They will introduce quite some glaring and rainbow patterns in your images here. This lens can get you some nicely out-of-focus backgrounds at f1.8, so let's see about the quality of its bokeh. I'm very pleased to say that it's pretty smooth. Your backgrounds will look nice and soft and undistracting, although occasionally you might catch a trace of green outlining around brighter points of light. And related to bokeh is longitudinal chromatic aberration. Here you can see that, at f1.8, we see quite a lot of colourful highlighting in your bokeh highlights. At f2.8 it's reduced, and at f4 virtually gone. So then, overall, the lens's optical performance is averagely good in most ways, but considering that this thing costs only $120 with an autofocus system, that makes it pretty great value for money for all you APS-C shooters out there. Its biggest competition that comes to my mind is probably the Sony equivalent, their 50mm f1.8 OSS lens. The Sony lens is sharper, especially in your image corners, and it has image stabilization, which will be really useful if your camera doesn't have it built in. But then again, the Sony lens costs nearly 3 times the price, so your choice here pretty much falls squarely down the line of your budget. The YONGNUO 50mm f1.8 SDA DSM would make a great beginner's lens, really, and it's easy to use with its autofocus system. Its image quality is quite decent, and it's very, very affordable, which all makes it recommended.